I cheated on my husband with my photographer, claiming it was work. My infidelity was recorded, leading to brutal revenge. Now my lover can't work, and I must use my body to support him and our son. My name is Renata, I am 26 years old, and I am an advertising model in Guadalajara. I have been working since I was 19, participating in campaigns for local fashion brands, shopping center displays, catalogs, and some popular magazines. I am not famous or a runway star, but I have earned my place through effort, although sometimes it did not seem like enough to me. My life was beautiful on the outside, but lonely on the inside. That night, when I met Pedro, I was at one of those artistic events full of people who speak in a difficult way to seem interesting. A friend dragged me there. I almost left before the wine ran out. I made a scathing comment about a painting that looked more like childish scribbles with cultish pretensions. It was then that I heard a man laugh beside me. "At least there is someone sincere here," he said. Pedro was 32 years old, with a serene gaze and the expression of someone who observes more than he speaks. He worked in data analysis and digital marketing for medium-sized companies. He had nothing artistic about him, but the sensitivity with which he listened to me was unparalleled. He looked at me as if he already knew me. For the first time in a long time, I felt seen. Our first chat lasted for hours, talking about everything and nothing. He did not try to impress me or seduce me, he simply listened to me and made me laugh. We started seeing each other without any commitment, with a naturalness that surprised me. Pedro was sensible, discreet, methodical, the complete opposite of almost everyone I knew in that world of fashion. Perhaps that is why I loved him. I was always surrounded by inflated egos and false intentions. With him, everything seemed honest. He would tell me that I had a different glow, as if I did not fit into that world of shop windows and camera flashes. Over time, we began to share more than just coffee and text messages. Little by little, my toothbrush ended up at his house, and he started keeping dark chocolate in the pantry, just because I liked it. A year and a half later, we rented an apartment together. It was spacious, with large windows and a bright kitchen where he liked to make fresh coffee every morning. Pedro was constant while I dealt with the ups and downs of my career. 1 month full of work, the next silence. He remained stable. He never judged me, not even when I got nervous for no reason or spent days in isolation. 2 years later, we got married. Everything was simple, just as we wanted it. No ostentation or drama, just important people. We chose a cozy restaurant in a quiet neighborhood with candles on the tables and a playlist that we had created ourselves. I wore a light dress, without a veil or heels, and Pedro wore a navy blue suit that matched his eyes. When we exchanged vows, he said, "You take my breath away, but you never let me fall." And I believed him. At that moment, everything felt perfect. I thought I had found my home with someone, not a place. During the first months of our marriage, our routines fit together like pieces of a peaceful puzzle. Sometimes he would work from home, and I would leave early for photo shoots. Pedro would send me loving messages at noon. He made sure to prepare chamomile tea for me at night, and he would wait for me even when I came home exhausted. I felt lucky, but in the midst of all this comfort, a silent restlessness began to arise within me. It was not his, it was mine. Something inside me wanted more, something I could not yet name, and that emptiness was beginning to grow. Married life began with the freshness of someone who believes they have made the right decision. Pedro and I shared more than a roof. We shared silent rituals, waking up to the smell of coffee, him reading the newspaper on his phone, me selecting clothes in the makeshift closet in our room. Sometimes we would only see each other at night, exhausted, but he would insist on cooking. Pedro was the one who put on soft jazz while stirring the tomato sauce in the pan. There was a tranquility in his constancy that made me believe I was right where I was supposed to be. My career was taking off little by little. I started getting campaigns for bigger brands, some even international. This meant traveling more, sometimes for 3 consecutive days in another city, other days in studios, changing clothes. Pedro never complained. He said he admired my strength and professionalism, even when I returned exhausted, in a bad mood, or stressed. He would greet me with a welcoming silence or calm words. "It will pass," he would tell me. And so it was for a while. I convinced myself that love was precisely that, someone who holds your hand without making a fuss. Loving messages became part of our daily life. Little notes on the fridge, emojis in the middle of the workday, quick audio messages saying, "Take care." Sometimes I would wake up in the middle of the night and feel his hand on mine, as if he wanted to make sure I was there. He was attentive to details, but he never suffocated me. He did not ask me where I was all the time. He did not make a scene. He let me be free, and that, for some reason, made me love him more. And it also gave me a freedom that perhaps I did not know how to handle. Pedro was the opposite of many men in my circle. While the photographers looked at me with desire and the businessmen with superiority, he just looked at me with pride. He never belittled me, never felt threatened by my appearance on a billboard or a television ad. He even joked, "Today I am going to sleep with a famous person." And I would laugh, not realizing that his light humor hid something I would only understand later, because, indeed, there was a growing silence inside him, a silence that, out of naivety or selfishness, I preferred not to hear. At dinners with friends, Pedro was reserved. He observed more than he spoke, but when he spoke, everyone paid attention. Sometimes he would look at me as if I were far away, even though I was sitting next to him. I attributed it to tiredness, to his introspection, but perhaps, even then, something was beginning to break, a microscopic distance, invisible to the naked eye, but real. I was so focused on myself, on my evolution, on my new contacts, on the trips I still had to take, that I did not realize how much less he fit into my new world. On the outside, we were the perfect couple, young, good-looking, successful. Everyone talked about our connection, about the complicity that was noticeable on social media. I would post photos of us smiling, having dinner, traveling. He would repost them with phrases like, "my love, my home." But inside the house, things were slowly changing. He started going to sleep before I did. He stopped waiting for me on the sofa when I came home late. Our conversations became shorter. And yet, I still believed that everything was fine, that true love had stages. But some stages do not just pass, others become permanent cracks. It all started with an unexpected invitation to do a more conceptual editorial. It was an alternative lingerie brand that was looking for something different, raw, with a visual narrative. The photographer in charge was Alex, 36 years old, known for his intense, almost cinematic work. They said he saw the body as a text, a field where light and shadow write stories. When we met in the studio, I felt something unexpected, a subtle, pulsating tension. His gaze, as if he saw something hidden even to me, unsettled me and made me curious. The first session was an emotional earthquake. The studio was dark with candles and directional lights. The wardrobe was minimalist, strips of fabric, transparent cloths. Alex directed calmly, but his gaze did not waver. "Push your hips out more. Look at me as if you were hiding a secret," he would say. And so it was. I felt every click like a racing heartbeat in my chest. Never had a job made me feel so alive. What was supposed to be a single session turned into several, and every time I returned home it was as if I left a part of myself in that studio. I started talking about him at home with an enthusiasm I used to reserve for international campaigns. Alex has such a different vision. He understands the body as pure expression, I would say while eating with Pedro. He would smile slightly and say, "That is great," but his gaze no longer matched his tone. Once he replied with a simple, "Yes, it seems you really enjoy working with him." And I ignored the weight of those words, because I did enjoy it, more than I should have, more than I was comfortable admitting. But it was still just work, right? Or so I kept telling myself. Each session with Alex was like a deep dive. He would get too close sometimes, whispering instructions in my ear. His fingers would graze my skin with the excuse of fixing my hair or correcting my pose. I felt chills even while trying to rationalize. When I looked at the photos later, I saw more than just images. I saw desire captured in pixels. His lens undressed me like no one else had been able to, and it filled me with guilt and hunger. I would go back home trying to erase the smell of the studio from my body, but Pedro could sense it, even without saying anything. At first it was subtle. Pedro stopped commenting on my photos. He no longer complimented me when I returned from the sessions, and, although he was still kind, there was an absence in his gestures, as if he were present, but at a distance. He would ask how my day went, but he did not wait for an answer. And I pretended not to see it, because facing it head-on would mean admitting that something was happening, and I did not want to. I preferred to live in that limbo between provocation and silence, between art and emotional betrayal. Pretending it was not real still gave me the excuse that it was not my fault. Over time, I started inventing little lies that I barely understood. I would say that the session lasted longer than it really did, that I needed to rehearse, to check his wardrobe. I made up details just to justify spending more time with Alex. But deep down, it was just desire. It was just a game I did not know how to get out of. I started looking forward to the sessions, not for the work, but for what I felt during them. Pedro was increasingly absent from my days, and I, even without having touched Alex yet, had already betrayed him, with every thought, with every suspended gaze, with every complicit silence between clicks and gasps. Little by little, talking about Alex became a dangerous habit. I would say he was brilliant, that he captured nuances no one else could. You should have seen what he did with the shadows today, I would say, as if talking about an award-winning director. And Pedro would just listen in silence, his fork still on his plate. Sometimes he would respond with a hum, other times not even that. And although I noticed that silence, I continued. Deep down, I wanted to provoke him. I wanted him to react, to say something to me, anything. But Pedro just observed, much more than I would have liked. The sessions with Alex began to be my escape valve. I prepared myself with an almost ritualistic attention. I chose the underwear, even though it would be on the floor in a matter of minutes. I wore perfumes that left a trail. I waxed, impeccably. I did my nails. All for him. And upon entering the studio, something in me changed. I became another person, more daring, more alive. I looked at myself in the mirror and desired myself. Alex saw it and smiled. We did not need to say much. A long gaze, a caress that lasted too long, was enough. It was art, was it not? It was pure, raw sexual tension, disguised as composition. Pedro noticed, I know he did. Maybe he did not know the details, but he sensed it. He was not stupid. He was attentive, analytical, one of those who understand a repeating pattern even if no one points it out. He started watching me when I returned. He looked at my clothes, my eyes, my posture. I pretended to be cheerful. I laughed at jokes that were not funny. I avoided eye contact. But he would just say, "Hello, how are you?" with a voice that no longer belonged to me. There was such a silent distance between us that it became deafening, and I pretended not to hear anything. One day he asked me what it was like working with Alex. I was stunned. I said he was intense, different, that he created art with my body. And Pedro simply replied, "I understand." Nothing more. That hurt me more than if he had screamed. He knew. I could feel it in his eyes, that gaze that does not accuse, but rather condemns. I started having nightmares. I dreamed that he was watching everything from afar, as if he knew every detail, but I still went ahead because it was no longer just an attraction. It was like a drug, an addiction fueled by the adrenaline of the forbidden. I remember the day when, in the middle of a session, Alex put his hand on my waist and left it there for too long. I did not pull away. On the contrary, I leaned my body in and closed my eyes. When I opened them, he was inches from my face. He almost kissed me, but he did not. He just smiled. And at that moment, I knew there was no turning back, that I had already crossed the line. Even without our lips touching, he had already possessed me completely. I went home with my heart racing and Pedro was in the kitchen preparing you. The guilt was burning inside me, but the desire burned even more. The worst part was knowing that I was divided. I slept with Pedro, but I thought about Alex. I woke up with Pedro and prepared for Alex. My body was no longer just mine. It was a battlefield between two worlds, and I knew that emotional betrayal is sometimes crueler than physical betrayal because it is silent, it is invisible, but it destroys with the same violence. And still, I went on. Why? Because I felt alive. Because, for the first time in years, someone saw me with fire in their eyes. But I knew it. I knew that Pedro could smell the smoke even before the fire began. The sessions with Alex stopped being a job and became rituals. I would prepare as if I were going on a date. I chose the lingerie like someone choosing a weapon for battle, nothing too flashy, but each piece said exactly what I wanted to say without words. Imported perfumes, subtle but calculated makeup, rigorous waxing, everything was thought out. Not for the cameras, but for him. And the most incredible thing is that it gave me pleasure, a silent excitement that grew every time I saw myself reflected in his gaze. And I let it happen because I no longer wanted to hold back. I started coming back from the sessions with a strange body, exhausted, tense, as if every muscle housed a secret that threatened to overflow. Pedro always noticed. His gaze would follow me as I entered the house. Sometimes, he would ask me random questions, disguised as curiosity. "How was the session?" he would say, stirring his coffee. And I would respond with vague phrases, smiling too much, avoiding his gaze. And he would just nod, but I saw it. He could smell the different scent on my skin, the strange glint in my eyes. The silence between us was no longer empty, it was filled with everything he did not say. The breaking point was small, almost banal. I was changing purses when he saw something fall to the floor, a new pair of panties, still with the tag, wrapped in tissue paper. They were black lace, imported, very expensive. Pedro picked them up carefully, holding them as if they were evidence of a crime. "It is a costume from the session," I lied quickly. "They said they would return it to me later." He did not answer. He simply left the garment on the table and left the room. And I knew at that moment that he did not believe me. But I also understood something worse. He was not going to confront me. He was simply going to let me sink alone. I had already slept with Alex some time ago. It started with a kiss in the studio, quick, urgent, without thinking. Then it happened without planning, without feeling guilty right away, on a stained leather sofa, then on the old rug in the light room. The sound of the clicks became the soundtrack of what we were, a mistake. And still I went home as if nothing had changed. I prepared dinner with Pedro, watched series, lay down next to him, and pretended we were fine. He hugged me out of habit, not desire, and I let myself be hugged, not out of love, but out of cowardice. With Alex, everything was instinct, pure lust. He possessed me as if he wanted to erase the world, and I let him. We looked at each other like two fugitives. There were no plans, no promises, just flesh. But when it was over, I felt empty, an emptiness that Pedro, without knowing it, tried to fill with simple gestures, a cup of tea, a blanket folded on the sofa, a kiss on the forehead. And it hurt because Pedro did not deserve it. He never deserved it. But I did not stop because my addiction to the forbidden had already completely dominated me and because a part of me wanted to be caught, wanted to be unmasked. I started to live in a constant state of alert. I began to hate the sound of notifications, check messages, erase traces. I became a stranger in my own life. Pedro did not confront me, but I sensed that he could at any moment, that a single slip would be enough. And still, I continued. I crossed the line every week, sometimes twice in the same day. I undressed for Alex with the same ease with which I lied to Pedro. And all of this became a routine, a dirty and clandestine routine, but mine, until one day I would see that all of this would turn against me. Pedro was never one to raise his voice. When he remained silent for too long, It was a sign that something serious was brewing inside him. And it was in that silence that he discovered everything. We used a cloud folder to share silly files, documents, travel photos, household budgets. And I, at the height of arrogance and carelessness, forgot to change the synchronization account for my cell phone's gallery. The photos were there, all of them. From the first and most daring photo shoots with Alex to the images that could no longer be called work. They were too intimate. They were the proof. Pedro opened the folder on a Sunday night. I was in the shower when he saw it. I do not know how long he stood there, looking at everything. The photos showed more than I dared to admit. Me lying naked under a dim light, smiles that were not faked. And then came the video. Shaky, hastily made with Alex's phone on top of a pile of clothes. It showed me on all fours, moaning his name, breathing heavily. And in front of the mirror, in it, by reflection, Pedro saw Alex approaching me with a hungry look, shirtless. It was the kind of video that leaves no room for doubt. There was no way to fake it. There was no way to avoid it. It was raw, real, without excuses, without editing, without art. Only betrayal. I do not know what Pedro felt at that moment, because he never told me. When I got out of the shower, I found him sitting on the edge of the bed with a lost look in his eyes. His eyes were red but dry. The TV was on, muted. He looked at me for a second and then looked away. I felt a chill in my stomach that not even the hot water could wash away. That silence shattered me more than any scream. He did not say a word. He did not confront me. He did not ask questions. He simply got up, put on a jacket, and left the house. He did not take his cell phone or his wallet, nothing. He just left. I stood there in a towel, not knowing what to do. I tried to call, nothing. I waited 2, 3, 5 hours. When he returned, he went straight to the guest room. He locked the door. The next morning, he did not say a word to me, and I knew. He had seen everything. And yet, he chose not to explode. He chose to leave me alone with my shame. And that was the beginning of my collapse. The following days were a silent torture. He would leave early, come back late, with an impassive face. The house that once smelled of coffee now smelled of guilt. I walked like a ghost, avoiding mirrors, avoiding talking. We no longer ate together. We no longer slept in the same bed. We no longer shared anything. I had buried myself alive. And the worst part, I deserved it. I started to relive the moment I pressed record on that damn video, as if I had signed my own sentence, as if I already knew that would be the weapon used against me. And still, I wanted the rush. I never imagined the fall would be so silent. I thought he would scream, that he would break things, that he would kick me out. But Pedro chose to punish me in a crueler way, with absence, with contempt. And that hurt more than any slap, because every minute he ignored me was like telling me, "You're no longer worth the effort of anger." And that tore me apart inside. I slept badly, I ate worse. I looked in the mirror and saw someone I did not recognize. And all of this, everything, started with a click, with the vanity of someone who wanted to feel alive again and dug their own end. That morning, I told Pedro I was having one more session with Alex. My voice sounded firm, almost defiant, but inside something was trembling. He just smiled, a strange, empty smile that cut through me like a blade. "Good luck," he replied and went back to stirring his coffee as if it were any other Tuesday. But that smile, there was something there that I did not understand instantly. It was not irony, it was disdain. And maybe revenge too. Still, I ignored my instincts and left. I took a taxi and went to the studio as if I were going to commit one last crime. In the studio, everything seemed the same. Dim lights, lit candles, the smell of cheap incense that Alex liked. We took off our clothes between smiles and mechanical touches, like two people who no longer knew how to separate desire from addiction. I lay face down on the rug, and he came from behind. Strong, urgent. I moaned for more. The walls muffled the sound, but at that moment the world seemed to fall silent to hear my downfall. It was then that the door opened, without a sound, without warning. And there was Pedro, with his phone in his hand, recording everything. My blood ran cold. I tried to cover myself, but it was too late. Pedro advanced without saying a word. Alex tried to get up, maybe to justify himself, to back away. There was no time. The punch was direct, precise, violent. Alex fell backwards, hitting his head on an iron tripod. The sound of the impact echoed throughout the studio. I screamed. Blood dripped onto the carpet. And Pedro, still firm, only said, "This is art to you." His voice did not tremble. It was cold, surgical. Then he turned to me, still naked, still in shock, and said calmly, "Do not ever come home again." And he left without looking back. Alex was moaning on the floor, trying to say something no one understood. His eyes were bleeding, glassy, desperate. I was trembling, breathing with difficulty, unable to get dressed properly. I called 911 with sweaty hands, the phone almost falling. They were minutes that seemed like hours. When the paramedics arrived, Pedro was already far away. They took Alex away quickly. The injury was serious, much more serious than I imagined. The tripod had pierced his face and damaged his vision. The images of that moment still haunt me when I close my eyes. The diagnosis was devastating, 80% loss of vision in both eyes. Alex never held a camera again. The man who once photographed me as if he were devouring me with his gaze was now a shadow of what he was. He began to live in silence, isolated, with the frustration of a mutilated artist. And I did not know where to go. Pedro had taken everything from me, and rightly so. I had no home, no love, no way back. And the worst part was knowing that he did not scream, or cry, or beg. He punished me in the most definitive way he knew, with his own absence and the total destruction of what I had chosen. That day, my life split in two, before the studio and after. I carry the memory like a burden, the sound of the camera, the smell of incense, the scream of pain, Pedro's gaze, everything merged into a scene that, if told, would seem exaggerated, but it was real. Pedro did not hit me, he did not curse me, he did not threaten me. He simply erased me from his existence. He excluded me like someone deleting a memory and left behind a naked woman surrounded by blood, silence, and regret. It was the beginning of my exile, an exile that I myself built, click by click, lie by lie. The days after the studio were a blur. I could not sleep, eat, or breathe. I could only think of Pedro. I sent messages begging for a chance to explain, even though I knew there was nothing left to explain. I called dozens of times. I went to our apartment. I sat on the sidewalk for hours and waited for him to arrive. When he appeared, he showed no surprise or anger. He simply said in a low, firm voice, "Now you too will pay with what you have, with what you did." And he went inside, closing the door. It was like hearing a final sentence, with no possibility of appeal, no forgiveness. I spent days trying to decide what to do. Going back to my parents' house was not an option. I had never been close to them. I slept on friends' sofas or in cheap motels, carrying a suitcase with the little I had left. One night, while vomiting in the bathroom of a rented room, something felt different. I took a test the next day, pregnant. The result was a punch to the gut. Alex was the father. There was no doubt about it. I knew it. And he was at home, blind, dejected, isolated from the world. When I told him, he did not respond. He sat in the dark for hours. Then he said, "My son will not see me, nor I him." Alex had lost everything, his career, his money, his identity. He spent his days locked in a room, drinking, crying, muttering incoherent phrases. The man who had taken me out of my routine had become a ghost. And I found myself trapped by him. The least I could do was stay, not out of love, but out of responsibility. But everything got worse when my professional life began to fall apart. One by one, my campaigns were canceled. Brands canceled contracts, invitations ceased. Even local studios ignored me. From one day to the next, I became a persona non grata in the fashion world. It took me a while to understand how the news had spread so quickly. Then I found out Pedro had sent a complete dossier. Photos, videos, screenshots, all delivered with surgical precision to agencies, production companies, and brands. He made sure that my name was synonymous with scandal and disgrace. No one wanted an image associated with the model who destroyed a husband and blinded a photographer. Soon, the only looks I received were judgmental. I went from being a display case muse to a joke behind the scenes. They silenced me without anyone having to say a word. My belly grew, and with it came the shame. I avoided going out. I wore sunglasses, even at night, as if I could hide from the world. I hated the baby for a while, not because it was guilty, but because it reminded me of everything, every bad decision, every lie, every recorded moan. Alex, unable to work, barely spoke. He would cry when he heard my voice, when he touched my belly, when he thought about what had happened. The house became a prison. I washed clothes in the sink of a dirty bathroom with trembling hands. Pedro had kept his promise. He destroyed everything, and he had not even started. There was no possible reconciliation with Pedro, with the world, with myself. I wanted to apologize, but what words can heal such a wound? The truth is that I was not a victim. I was the cause of my own fall. And now, every step, every penny, every breath was a debt to Pedro, to Alex, to this baby who never asked to be born into this chaos. And deep down, I knew that what Pedro did was not impulsive, it was calculated. He did not just want to leave me, he wanted to make sure I never forgot. And I did not forget, not for a second. There came a point when there was nothing left to sell. The contracts had vanished, the money had evaporated, and the bills kept coming. I could no longer pay the rent, health insurance, or even food. Pregnant, with a blind man at home, and a world that turned its back on me, I had to make a decision I never imagined: to use the sensual photos Alex had taken of me to create a profile on an escort website. Was it that or starve to death? At first, I thought it would be a one-time thing, just until I sorted things out. But there is nothing temporary when you are already mired in filth. The clients came quickly, older, discreet, demanding men. Some would be polite, others would be unpleasant. Sometimes it would be 2 a day, then 3. Soon I was doing up to 15 a week. When I realized it, it was more than my body could handle. I would go home in pieces. My feet were swollen. The smell of sweat and perfume mixed together. The bitter taste of regret in my mouth. And I did not even have time to feel anything. I had to take care of the child, the house, the little I had left. With each new appointment, I lost a little more of myself. And at the same time, I could not stop. Alex, blind and shattered inside, did nothing but hold the baby in his arms and cry. He would spend his days sitting on the same sofa, repeating phrases like, "This is my fault," and "What have I done to you?" He was no longer a man, he was a shadow. And I, although I hated him for everything he represented, let him take care of the child when I was not there. Not because I trusted him, but because I had no other choice. I was so broken that I could no longer feel jealousy, guilt, or fear. I could only survive. The baby grew up between 2 parents dead inside, one literally, the other emotionally. At night, I would lock myself in the bathroom and cry, with my head pressed against the tiles. I tried to muffle the sound so as not to wake Alex or the child. Sometimes I cried from pain, other times from shame, sometimes from anger. I slept badly, I ate even less. I lived in a constant state of exhaustion and despair. I tried to count the days, but they all seemed the same. A dirty, repetitive cycle from which I no longer knew how to escape. Prostitution stopped being a choice and became a sentence, something I accepted without complaint because I no longer believed I deserved anything better. Pedro never contacted me again. Not a message, not a call. But I knew he was behind everything. There was no other explanation for the precision with which they buried me alive. Some brands even blocked me on social media. I was sued for breach of image in a contract. All of this without Pedro laying a finger on me. He just pressed the right buttons at the right time. He did not want justice, he wanted it to end. And he got it. While I fell apart day after day, he remained silent, as if I had never existed, as if erasing my existence was his final masterpiece. I am no longer that woman from the gallery, nor the one from the campaign, nor the one on the velvet carpet of Alex's studio. I am another, a figure who survives by selling parts of her own body to feed a child who was born from the ashes of her mistake. I look in the mirror and see nothing. I no longer have a name in the market, no friends, no self-esteem. And even if all this were to pass, I would still have a scar that no one sees. The scar is knowing that someone loved me so much, and I destroyed everything out of vanity, out of a thirst for something I no longer know what it was. Peter did not need to kill me, he just needed to let me kill myself alone.